What's up, people? In this video I bring you the most anticipated transformation of the last few months, the transformation of the Leoncani. In this video you will see how we disassemble the car, change its color and make modifications to make it unique. As you already know, a few months ago I got this San Leon before it went to the scrapyard. And the truth is that with the orange color, how poorly it was maintained, and the interior being destroyed and in such bad taste, plus a breakdown of the camshaft and turbo, I think it was definitely ready to be scrapped. But for me, this is a challenge and a way to create content for you, besides the fact that the San Leon is a car I have always loved, as I have had 7 of them, and I believe it is a car worth restoring. I spent 3 months on this project, and it's not just a paint job, as literally everything had something wrong with it, whether it was mechanical, interior or upholstery. As you can see on the outside, for example, it had a broken door lock, there was a spoiler at the back that had 2 holes drilled into the sheet metal, and it had a few scratches here and there along with some dents. In the engine area, apart from being filthy, we had a problem with the camshaft, something very common in these cars. Well, before I start with the mechanics, I like to work on a clean surface, so the first thing I did was give the engine a complete cleaning. This car has been operational in the field for over 1.5 years now, and if you add oil leaks to that, the result you get is an engine this dirty. With the top part of the engine clean, it's time to lift the car on the hoist and also clean the area underneath the car and the entire lower part of the engine. To clean this part here, we use the same method that we applied to the top of the engine. We apply a degreaser, let it act, and then use high pressure water to remove all the grease and dirt from the underside and the engine. With everything clean, we can start with the mechanics. The first thing I did was disassemble the entire intake of the car to remove the turbo, to replace it with a new one but not an original one. Instead, I used a hybrid turbo ATC, with which the car will produce much more power than with the stock one. And after changing the turbo, it was time to address the camshaft, which had significant wear on one of the lobes, as the car had been used with a damaged camshaft and a perforated lifter. To change the camshaft, we bought a kit that included everything, including the bushings and the lifters. And to ensure the engine is well maintained for a long time, we did the timing belt with a new water pump and also changed all the engine fluids. With the car's mechanics 100% ready and functioning perfectly, it was time to move on to the aesthetics. After all, making a camshaft and a turbo is nothing compared to removing this orange color. Just as we did with the engine and the undercarriage, since the exterior was also quite dirty, the first thing we are going to do is give it a quick wash. For this, we apply degreaser all over the bodywork and rinse it with high pressure water. Once the bodywork is clean, we can see how perfect the paint is, but to be honest, I don't really care about that since we are going to paint the whole car and change its color. And one of the best parts of the car on the outside is the rear bumper, but I don't care about that either since we are going to replace it with the bumper from the Cupra. And one of the parts that hasn't improved at all with the cleaning is the rear lights. To disassemble some parts of the body, we need to remove some plastics from the interior, so we directly start taking apart the entire interior completely, allowing us to do a deep cleaning and leave the interior 100% clean. As I mentioned, this car has worked in the field for its last few years, and you can really tell when I start taking off the plastic because a lot of dust comes out. I think that of all the cars that have gone through extreme cleaning on the channel, this is the one with the most dirt on all the interior plastics. Seeing the condition of the car's interior, we also removed the carpet so we could clean the entire floor properly, and we can scrub the carpet outside the car to make it cleaner. We also took out the soundproofing materials and thoroughly checked all these areas of the car. One thing I see in the back group these years is that the drainage plugs we have on the floor or these pass-throughs end up being ineffective, and look here, all the dust from the car was coming in. As you can see, even though the floor had insulation and carpet, dirt was still getting into all these areas here, and it's all super disgusting. And since we are disassembling, we also take out the entire roof section and remove this horrible orange upholstery that they put on. As you can see, the car has a sunroof, so we are also going to dismantle it since the guides were quite dirty. This way we can do some maintenance and put it back in the car greased up so that it doesn't cause problems for a long time. And we continue removing plastic from interior. We also removed glove box and plastic that goes under steering wheel. There is no need to take out dashboard since we don't have to do anything there, and it can be cleaned as it is. In order to dismantle the body, we are going to raise the car high to access the screws located underneath the car and remove the wheel arches. To remove the body parts, I won't go into details about which screws to take out and where they are, because otherwise the video would take a long time, but I can say that the San Leon is super easy to dismantle. It's a fairly simple car with 4 screws in the wheel arches, 4 screws in the bumper, and everything comes off quite easily. As you can see, we are dismantling all the parts of the car, and I think that to change the color of the car, the best thing is to take it apart completely. As you saw earlier, one of the doors had a broken lock cylinder and the door itself was quite damaged, so we are going to replace it directly with another one. Before painting this door, what we need to do is place it on the car and adjust the hinges so that the door fits well, to avoid having to handle it once it is painted. This door isn't perfect either. It had some dents but was much better than the one the car had, so we can easily recover this one. By the way, if you didn't notice in the video, the engine bay is blue, which is the car's original color. As you can see in the video, I am dismantling everything, and there is no part of the car that doesn't need work. The headlights damaged by the sun. We stopped dismantling parts of the car. The parts that I have left on the body right now have dents, and to remove these dents, it will be more convenient to keep them on the car than to take them off and put them on some stands, which will make it more difficult to work. To start removing dents in the metal areas, the first thing we need to do with a sanding disc is clean the paint, and then with the dent removal machine we will begin to pull out the metal to straighten it. Once we have the sheet metal as straight as possible, we will apply a layer of putty to finish leveling it, and we will sand it with a block. This depends on each person's skill, as it may turn out well on the first try, or you might need to go over it again. I removed some parts too much from the sheet metal and they ended up with small bumps. So we use a hammer to push them inward, apply a new layer of putty, and sand it down again with the block. This car used to have one of those ugly spoilers that is placed on the tailgate, and 2 holes had been drilled in the tailgate to attach it. We covered these with welding and smoothed them out with a disc grinder. Then to finish leveling that area, we apply a bit of putty and sand it with the block, just like we did with the large dent. Once we have removed all the dents from the tailgate, we take the sander and a 600 grit sandpaper and sand it completely. The door we replaced for the driver also has some dents, so we follow the same process. We clean the paint, remove the sheet metal, everything we can, and apply filler. Then, with a sanding block, we level all these areas properly. Some of you might think that there is a difference in fixing the other door, this one. The other one has a dent right on the lock, and it's somewhat complicated to repair, so this one is much simpler. We would just need to remove the dents from the front fender. On the body, we only have a fairly large dent on the rear fender. And for this we clean the paint, pull it a couple of times with the machine to straighten the sheet metal as much as we can, and apply a layer of putty which we sand down with a block, and it turns out perfect. Now we take the sander and a 600 grit sandpaper and sand the entire body completely. On the roof section, we had some areas of hardened varnish, so the recommendation is that since we have paint underneath that is peeling, we should sand it down completely. With the sander and a coarser sandpaper, we sanded down all the black paint until we reached the original color. Now we will need to sand all the parts where we cannot use the sander. We do this with a sanding sponge, a little patience, and by hand. On the door frames, on the protective stickers to avoid stepping on the paint when they painted the car orange, they made a cut with masking tape, and the truth is that it looks very ugly and seems like a botched job. So we are going to remove it, apply a little heat, stretch it, and pull it off. Then we will see what alternative we can put here to avoid stepping on the paint. To paint this area and make the cut less noticeable, we will sand down a bit of the paint edge to level it out. When we have sanded down the entire chassis of the car, we blow it well to remove all the dust and clean it with a silicone-free degreaser. And we apply primer with a spray gun to all the areas where we have reached the metal, where we want to level the paint, and on the putty patches. Once the primer has dried, we need to sand it to level it and remove imperfections. We apply a bit of sanding guide, and using a sander with 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, we start sanding the primer to eliminate all the imperfections in the paint and the lumps left from the primer itself. The primer is like a liquid putty that helps us remove imperfections from the paint and seal the pores of the putty. We have finished sanding the car and no more dust. We are going to clean this mess in the interior. We are going to use CX Sound Degreaser, not with a handheld sprayer. We are going to use one of these pressure sprayers, which is faster and more convenient. As you can see, I'm giving it my all in the parts, and I don't mind getting the wires wet. Obviously the car's battery is disconnected, but the only way to clean this is like this. If we have to clean this by hand with a brush and a vacuum, it would be a bit crazy. Once we have applied the degreaser, we take our pressure washer and water, without hesitation, thoroughly cleaning all the gaps and areas of the bodywork hard to reach. We remove all the dirt and mud embedded in the car from every angle. We reassemble the car's wheels and it will be ready to go into the paint booth and be painted. Although we are not going to paint it yet, we will prepare all the disassembly of the car, and when we start painting we will paint everything. Let's start with the front bumper, which has a pretty ugly crack. This crack is old because there was silicone on the back, so the first thing we are going to do is clean any silicone that might be left there so that when we weld the plastic, it doesn't get contaminated and the joint remains strong. We also need to clean the paint on the outside to be able to make the weld. When the piece is clean, we will put a welding point to keep it in place, and then we will apply a plastic bead starting from the back. And then similarly, we do the same process and put a cord along the front. From the front, we take the sander and an 80 grit sandpaper and remove all the excess plastic to make it smooth and level. On the edge of the wheel arch, there was a small dent and a piece of plastic was missing, so we filled it by welding and then sanded it down. We leveled it off and it was ready. This way, we don't have to use any glue filler, putty or anything unusual. Since we are welding plastic, one of the side skirts had an old repaired crack. They had used metal staples, which I can tell you do not work at all. And then silicone or plastic glue was applied from the back. I say this does not work. The best option is to weld plastic whenever possible. Not all plastics can be welded. To make this part stronger, we will insert a welded steel mesh from the back. And we will do the same at the front as we did with the bumper. We take a plastic rod and weld the crack, then sand it well with the sander to level it and restore its original shape, and that's it. I say this part will never break. Just like we did with the car's side, we use 600 grit sandpaper to completely sand the paint and prepare these pieces for priming. Now it's time for the rear bumper that I bought from the Cupra. This bumper had about 3 layers of silver grey paint and was very chipped and quite cracked. So the best option was to completely clean this paint, and for this, a paint stripper can be used. The paint stripper does not affect the plastic of the bumper, so we can let it work for as long as we want. It is advisable to apply a layer, and if we see that the layer underneath is not affected by the paint stripper, we remove it with a spatula and apply another layer. And to finish cleaning the stripper and any paint that may be left, we take the pressure washer with a nozzle that has a lot of pressure and clean everything. In the areas where the bumper has dents from impact, we apply a bit of heat and straighten it from the back, and then we apply filler to all the areas that need correction. Next step, we will prepare the car doors. The grey door where the dent is removed will only need to be sanded on the inside. With a sanding sponge, we sand it down and dull the entire paint surface so that when we paint over it, the paint adheres properly. And there were still things to disassemble on the rest of the doors, such as the trims. We pulled them off. They come with double-sided tape, so we carefully pulled to avoid breaking them, and that was it. We also disassembled the lock and the window regulator panel. These doors didn't have any major dents, but they did have some small nicks, so we applied a bit of filler to them and sanded them down. Here we don't really bother to take it out with the machine because it's absolutely not worth it, as they are very tiny dings. The car's hood is not very noticeable in the video, but it has a dent of at least 40 centimeters from having been punched, and repairing this is quite complicated. And since the workshop had the hood that matches the door we put on the driver's side and it was in pretty good shape, it just has some dents, we repaired this. So we removed some of the dents with the machine and also took off all the little chips from the road, which are very tiny spots. But these can create rust and cause the paint to lift. So we clean all that well with a disc, apply some putty and level it. And just like we did with the doors, we also sand the inside to paint it from the interior. And we would have all the parts sanded and with all the dents removed. Now we need to apply the primer. For this, we will do it inside the paint booth. Just like we did with the car chassis, we need to apply 2 coats and cover all the putty areas and sheet metal sections. As you can see, we left the rear bumper in bare plastic, so before applying the primer, we need to apply a plastic primer to ensure better adhesion. And just like we did with the chassis of the car, once the primer is dry, we need to sand it to smooth all these parts and level it. With everything ready to paint, we will start with the chassis, so into the oven. We need to cover the chassis to protect the engine parts and the cabin. For this, we will use masking tape, plastic and paper, as well as foam seal to cover some of the holes that lead to the cabin. If no paint gets inside the cabin, practically nothing would happen because it is almost all disassembled. However, what we are trying to avoid by covering everything very well is that dust from the inside comes out and sticks to the outside. So we do need to cover everything very well. When they painted the car orange, they painted part of the interior of the chassis and the whole beam area. I really don't care about those areas that are orange because they will be covered with plastic. This part here will be covered with the bumper, so we won't complicate things. We mask all of this well so that no dirt gets on when blowing with the gun, and we paint the areas that really need to be the new color. With the foam seal, we make plugs to cover the holes where we cannot use masking tape. We cover the wheels with a bit of paper and also properly tape the entire area of the front wheel arch and the engine compartment. Cleaning before painting is super important, so with a new and clean cloth and anti-silicone degreaser, we wipe down all the body panels of the car. Once clean, we can start painting. We are going to paint the roof black, so we put some paper on the sides and begin to apply the base color. The color we are applying to the roof is a smooth epicapa color, meaning it needs varnish. It dries, it will become matte. We will apply 2 coats of paint to ensure good coverage. Once the black color has dried, we will not apply the varnish. Instead, we will wait for it to dry, cover it, and apply the varnish when we paint the rest of the body. And now we can start painting the body, which has been so mysterious with the color to give it a pearl white finish. Well, yes, in the end, the black roof contrasts quite a bit, and instead of a regular flat white, a pearl white looks good. This paint is a 2-layer system, and just like the roof, it requires 2 coats and needs to dry before applying the varnish. And this is how the car would look painted white. Just kidding, this is a base color to give it the original blue. Well, yes, it was the best option since the engine bay is blue, and you were practically begging me for the car to be blue. And I love this color. This blue was only available in the FR and it wasn't a very popular color, so blue lines of this color are not seen much. This original blue of the car is a solid color, so we could paint it in a single layer. I don't like painting in a single layer, I prefer to use varnish. So it is a 2-layer system. The tone is exactly the same, but when the paint dries, it becomes matte. And to make it shine, we need to apply a varnish. Painting in 2 layers requires more work as applying the base color and then adding the varnish. When purchasing the paint, it costs more as we need to buy both the base and the varnish. When the blue dries, we remove the masking tape from the roof, prepare the varnish, and start lacquering the entire car. Another reason I use a 2-layer system is because I will apply a lot of varnish. We will give it about 4 coats all over, as later we will level the paint and polish it to a mirror finish so that this beautiful blue remains. As you can see, the paint shines a lot, but with so much varnish applied, the paint gets a bit wavy, almost like it has orange peel texture. Right now it's noticeable a little, but once we level it out, it will be perfect. Set the cabin temperature to 80 OC to dry and stretch, and once dried, we can take it outside and start with the disassembly. To paint the parts, since there are quite a few, we have to go step by step. The first thing we are going to do is paint the doors on the inside, and we will also start painting the side skirts. Just as we did with the chassis of the car, we clean it well with anti-silicone degreaser and start by applying the white base color. The blue color covers a lot, but when using it in a 2-layer system, it is advisable to use a white base, so it ends up being more expensive. If we used it in a single layer straight, we could have sprayed the blue over the orange and needed to apply a base color. Buying white base paint is much more expensive than single layer paint. I will eventually make a video on all car expenses, since you enjoy them. In some areas, the door and sill interiors, since we are not going to level any varnish, we apply 2 coats for good stretch. We let the inside of the doors dry for 24 hours, and then we can turn them over to paint the other side. And we take advantage of the space we have left to fit in more pieces, in this case the door trims and the handles and pulls.
Told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. Guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile and till I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away.
We apply 4 good coats of varnish to the outside of the doors, so that when we level the paint, we have enough thickness to sand and achieve a smooth finish. The next parts we are going to paint are the interior of the hatch and the interior of the hood. Just like we did with the doors, we leave it for a full day to ensure it sets well, so we can turn it over and paint the other side. We also take the opportunity to put more parts inside the cabin, such as the spoiler. Look at how beautiful this color shines. The spoiler is what I liked the most out of everything I painted. They looked perfect. In the next batch of parts to paint, we include all remaining core. These are the bumpers and the side mirrors, which will be painted black. The spoiler will also be painted black. These are the covers of the side skirts, to which I have added these sticks so that I can hold them by hand and paint them well on all sides. We are also going to paint all the grills of the bumper in black, since they come in a grayish color and are a bit worn out due to time. We will paint them in glossy black. We will also paint the diffuser of the rear bumper in black. We started by painting the parts that are black, like the spoiler as I mentioned. And look, this part here is the bottom of the spoiler, which they left blue. They had the car orange with that blue part, and the truth is that it looked amazing when I saw the car from the back. In this part of the rear bumper, we do the same as with the car's roof. We first paint it black, then we mask the black part and paint the bumper blue. All the grills of the bumper, although you can't see it in the video, have adhesion promoter applied so that the paint adheres well. Since the video is quite long, I had to cut some parts to avoid making it longer, and the promoter was not shown. When the black paint dries, we cover the area of the bumper, and on this part that we have painted black, we apply white to cover it. The blue paint does not have difficulty covering.
Told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. You're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look.
When the blue dries, we uncover all the parts in black and start applying varnish to everything. By the way, before I forget, a little reminder that I always mention every time I go out painting a car, but I repeat it because there are always new people. I am not a body worker. Everything I do because I like to challenge myself. And if I see any mistakes, instead of criticizing me, give me a piece of advice for next time. You can't tell me that the color doesn't look amazing when it shines with the varnish, because I love it. I don't regret it at all, and I also love the contrast with the black. Finally, we have all the car parts painted and all the pieces are dry, so we can start assembling the body. I think this is the only time I have needed help with the Lion, since the doors are very heavy and putting them on after painting them to avoid any scratches, well, it doesn't appeal to me. So I asked my brother for help. With the doors mounted on the car, we can install the windows and all the seals. Since they were quite dirty from all the dirt and mud they had, we took the opportunity to clean them thoroughly while they are disassembled. In the next assembly step, we are going to prepare the front bumper. We need to paint the fog light openings black, as having them appear blue through the grille looks quite unattractive. So, with a matte or satin spray or a plastic texturizer, we paint the interior of the cavity. And now we have to reattach the grills, which are welded to the bumper. They have some points that we will heat up a bit with the heat gun and use something metallic to press them down slightly so that they hold the grill in place. We will also install a new front spoiler. A subscriber gave this to me. He had it lying around his house. For the central logo part, it has this chrome piece and then the SAT badge also in chrome, but I don't like it at all, so since I have this carbon fiber vinyl that looks lacquered as if it were 4D, we're going to wrap it, which I think will match the blue better than leaving it chrome. What do you think? Would it have looked better chrome, or do you like it more this way? And since we've made the front logo in carbon fiber, we'll also do the rear badge where the trunk opening is. Before mounting the front bumper, we need to prepare the headlights. If you remember, they were quite worn out, and well, putting this on the car like that looks very ugly. Here I got a bit carried away and took apart the headlights to install a bisenon projector in the short part. And since I'm a bit fussy and can't stay still, I made an engraving on the lens glass so that it would be visible when we turned on the lights. I also added some RGB lights to take posture photos of the car. And to make the transparent part look like new, I chose it very carefully to remove all the damaged areas and re-lacquered it. And this is how the headlights looked, super worn and quite old. And this is how they turned out after being lacquered, adding the lens and painting the backgrounds black. In the trunk area, we need to install the spoiler, and now we are missing the rear lights. If you remember, it had some tuner lights that were a mess, and well, I kind of lost my mind a bit, and instead of buying the originals, I saw these that looked cool on the website, but when I saw them in person, they looked too chrome. So before returning them, I came up with the idea of putting black vinyl on them and tinting them, and honestly, they caught my attention much more. I have to say that after seeing them installed on the car with the black vinyl, I absolutely love them. You can tell that these headlights are a bit more modern, and honestly they give the car a really nice look. I know this won't be to everyone's taste, but since I had already bought them, I was too lazy to return them, and seeing them tinted black, I actually liked them quite a bit. Before installing the rear bumper, we have a small problem. The dual outlet of the FR does not align with the outlet of the Cupra bumper, and it interferes with the bumper, preventing us from fitting it properly. So here it is quickly. I bought one of these exhaust lines from Escosta with a Cupra style outlet, which was the fastest and fit perfectly with the bumper. This exhaust line I got includes the middle and final sections and will connect from the catalytic converter. It's quite easy to install, to be honest. Just remove the old exhaust, put in the new one, and what we do need to do is weld the brackets that go to the rubber mounts to place the line where we want. It's really great that it comes like this because we can align the exhaust tip perfectly with the bumper. Before attaching the bumper to the car, we are going to install a diffuser that I made with 3D printing. There is a video on the channel that I will link at the end of the video in case anyone wants to take a quick look and hasn't seen it. We also took the opportunity to install a rear view camera before mounting it on the car. I'm not very keen on putting a gadget right in the middle of the bumper, but this camera has great visibility, and the typical ones you find on AliExpress for license plate lights often fail and need to be replaced frequently, while this one has amazing image quality. Before installing the wheel arches, we also cleaned them as they had a lot of dirt on the back. And since these parts, in particular the front ones, were considerably worn out, I took a black texturizer and quickly and effectively sprayed them to make them look black again, and to remove the marks from the wear. All of this may seem trivial, but I like these details. And then there's the sunroof and the antenna. While looking on Amazon, I found this antenna that fit just like the original, and I liked it to have a different one. And regarding the sunroof, we first have to prepare the upholstery. They had glued the synthetic leather and it was almost impossible to peel it off. I managed to remove it, but indeed, fortunately, since I had a Toledo in the workshop that had a sunroof, I kept the parts that I might need for the Lion and took the roof off. The only issue is that the back part doesn't match, but that's not a problem. We are also going to install the sunroof from the Toledo, which is in much better condition and isn't as dirty. For the guide to upholstering the roof, we need to remove the old fabric and clean all the rotten foam. In this case, I took a big risk because I cleaned it very carefully with high pressure water, which I do not recommend at all since we could definitely break the roof. It didn't break, but it could have happened. As for the sunroof part, which is like the curtain or sunshade, we can absolutely work on that since it's plastic. Once we have the roof dry, we apply glue to the fabric we are going to use and to the roof part. We need to let it dry a bit to the touch, and when it's dry, we spread it over the fabric and flip it over. If someone is there to help, it's better to hold the fabric by both ends and stretch it over the roof. But this roof was small, so it can't be done that easily. For the sunshade part of the sunroof, we apply glue to both the piece and the fabric, then we spread the fabric and trim the excess. As you have seen, the roof of the Lion was originally orange and we have changed it to black, but the plastics are grey. But for me, leaving this grey is a bit of a botch job, so we are going to clean them well to remove all the dirt they have, and we are going to paint them black. To paint the plastics, the first thing we need to do is apply a primer so that the paint adheres properly. We apply a smooth coat of primer over all the plastics to ensure they are well covered. Once the primer is dry, we apply a base coat of black, which can be either a matte black or a satin black. I recommend matte because it will dry faster. When the colors are glossy like this in spray, it takes a long time to dry, so if it's matte, it will dry very quickly. Once we have applied the base color, we let it dry for 3 to 4 hours and then apply a matte or satin varnish. With the varnish, the piece is much better protected, and when it comes to cleaning, it is much easier to clean over the varnish than over the paint. And after applying the varnish, let it dry for at least 48 hours to ensure it dries properly. While we let all those plastics dry well, we move on to the part of the car and install the sunroof. In the dashboard, when we disassembled the car parts, I didn't remove the steering wheel as we had to move the car, but now we no longer need to move it, we removed it. We also disassembled all these parts of the steering wheel. Look how they are on the inside. We also took apart the controls for the turn signals and the windshield wipers, and we removed the dashboard to clean and restore it as it was super scratched and very dirty. On the steering column, there was a plastic part broken, so we removed it to find a replacement in the junkyard. Since we plan to install a screen, we also took out the entire center console, including the climate control. We are not going to disassemble the dashboard because it's a hassle, so with the cleaner we remove all the dust that hides in all its nooks, and that's enough. There's no need to take it apart. The dashboard is very dirty and also scratched, so we are going to take it apart. We will disassemble it because the bulb for the right turn signal does not light up on the dashboard when we activate it. Having removed the dashboard, we will take apart this whole part and check what is going on. As you can see, the one on the left works when we apply current with the multimeter, but the one on the right does not. That means the bulb is blown. Since I didn't have any old bulbs in the workshop to replace that light bulb, I thought of using an LED from an RGB strip connecting only the green part. The only thing we have to do is change both, as one was brighter than the other and it would look bad. These LEDs are at least 10 times brighter than the original ones I had, but it looks good, so I'm fine with it. For the transparent part of the frame, which was quite dirty on the inside, we cleaned it well with a little water and soap. And as you can see, the outside was super scratched, and this is from rubbing it with dust or cleaning it improperly. So with the polisher secured in the jack, we polished it really well and made the glass look like new. Now we can reassemble it and see the difference compared to how it was before. Since I have the car disassembled, I have done things off cam as I want to make an exclusive video about this, but I will still explain a bit about it. Since I want to install an interior sound system in the car, and since the car is disassembled, I have taken the opportunity to run cables for the amplifiers. I have also run a power cable from the front battery to the back seats to place the amplifiers in the trunk. However, as I mentioned, I want to make an exclusive video, and I will show how I did this entire installation. Another extra we are going to install in the car is the speed control, as it is super easy in diesel cars. Since the car is disassembled, the lever costs $25 and running the cables is very simple. The only thing we have to do is run the cable from the steering wheel to the box where the connections to the engine control unit are located. That box is right below the windshield wipers. In order to continue assembling the interior of the car, we need to clean and install the carpet, as all the plastics are mounted on top of it. It can be cleaned very easily with CX8 degreaser and high-pressure water. What did you expect me to use to clean it, if not? Once the carpet is dry, we install the insulators, which, as you have seen, I haven't cleaned because they cannot be cleaned. If they get wet, they get damaged. The only thing we can do with them is to blow off the dust and remove the dirt. To assemble all the console plastics, we first need to install the central part of the radio console. But as I mentioned before, we want to add a screen to it. Here we have a problem, which is that to install a screen, the console needs to be modified quite a bit. The little frame is sold, which would be prepared for a 2-din, but the furniture, and for the furniture, if I find any second-hand, they ask for €600 for it. so I will make it myself. The modification we need to make is to move the climate control down and leave enough space to fit the screen. Just like I mentioned with the music system cables, when I set up the music system, I will show you the process of how I did all this, as what I did was cut the part of the climate control support and weld it a little lower so that it fits. For the screen, all I did was basically take the original support and essentially make some attachments to screw it in. I'm not entirely happy with the modification because, in fact, the frame was designed for the original Navigator, and there are some gaps, but we will ultimately fix it later with 3D printing by adapting a frame to fit perfectly in the end. Now, to continue assembling the interior, we need to clean the rest of the plastic, which is all covered in dirt, so water, pressure, and degreaser, nothing changes here. The truth is that I would like to see all those people who make videos with their little brushes and foam, cleaning those little cars that are already clean, cleaning the interior of these. We let the plastics drain well, ensuring that all excess water is removed to prevent any potential damage or mold growth. Since we are using the pressure washer, which is highly effective in removing dirt and grime without much effort, and haven't gotten our feet wet, we also take the opportunity to thoroughly clean the carpets in the trunk. This not only enhances the cleanliness of the vehicle, but also maintains its overall condition. Since I'm a bit of a perfectionist, always striving for the best possible outcome, and the project hasn't given me too many headaches, we are also going to install some RGB lights. These lights will illuminate the footwell of the car, adding a touch of modernity and style, while also providing practical lighting for the interior. We are installing some lights for the passenger's footwell and the driver's footwell, and we are also going to add them to the front seats so that the back footwells are illuminated as well. We are also just going to actually run a power cable from where the front seat anchors are to the fuse box. I will simply explain later what this is for. We connected the footlight control unit where the central console is, and we took the power from the cigarette lighter. Since we no longer have an ashtray, we don't need this connector at all, so we connected it there. And we can now start assembling the rest of the interior plastic. In fact, before assembling the plastics of the car, there is another detail to address, which is the seat belts. When I removed them from the car, they were practically rotten from the amount of dirt they had, from soil, dust, and the reels were even rusted. And here, instead of complicating things, I think this is the only thing I had them do for me, which is that I sent them to the people at Custom Bell to have them reupholstered in blue. In other words, they cleaned the reels and put new blue fabric that matches the car. I could sew these myself with my machine, but between buying the fabric, getting the special thread, and the headache it causes, it's not worth it. So it's true that I won't be doing this myself. With the seatbelt parts and the plastics for the pillars installed, we can also fit the roof and all the black parts of the roof. Next step, car door panels. These were practically destroyed. Broken grills, the panels heavily scratched, and the upholstery was in the same condition. Something very common in Group B. To start, the first thing is to clean the upholstery part. This is plastic, so use high-pressure water and degreaser without fear. Nothing will happen to them. With the panels clean and dry, we now need to remove the central part. This is welded with spots of welding on the plastic, so what we need to do is heat it with a heat gun and use a bit of leverage to remove the spots until we separate the central part from the rest of the panel. Now, to upholster this part with stretch headliner fabric, I wanted to use a suede-like fabric. This fabric does not stretch, it requires sewing. So we have to fill the panel with masking tape to make a template, mark it where we are going to cut it with the respective marks for sewing, and that's it. With that, we have a pattern. We transfer it to the fabric, Cut the fabric pieces, sew, make the seams, and that's it. We have a piece that should fit us perfectly. But no, this fabric is absolutely not recommended at all for panels as it wrinkles a bit. And there are some things that are inevitable to happen. To attach it to the panel, the first step is to glue the seam part, and from there we apply glue on the panel and the fabric while pulling to ensure that no wrinkles are left. This fabric is not meant for this, and it was hard for me to leave it wrinkle-free, but even so, some things are still noticeable. Later on, if I find some panels in good condition, with fewer scratches than the ones I currently have installed, then we will reupholster others again with a different fabric that looks better. Well, it doesn't look that bad, but there are some areas like the inside of the handle that have wrinkles that are impossible to remove. But at first glance, the fabric actually looks nice, and I don't know, it looks cool for the panels. The plastic panel part was destroyed practically everywhere. It was extremely scratched and looked really ugly. To paint this, well, it has texture, and the truth is we could lose it a bit, so I came up with an idea to repair the parts that were in the worst condition. The first thing we are going to do is use painter's tape to outline a square. In that square we have left, we are just going to simply apply a bit of car wax. And in that square with wax, we will apply a bit of putty. With this, we will achieve a template with the texture pattern of the panel. And now you might be wondering, what do we need that for? Well, to fix areas like this. As you can see these holes we have here in the panel, what we are going to do is use the heat gun to melt the plastic a bit until it becomes quite liquid. And with that putty knife, we are going to use it like a stamp. We will re-engrave the texture pattern back into the plastic panel. We have managed to cover the holes and still have the texture pattern, although it is noticeable because we have heated the plastic. So, to level those colors, we are going to take a sanding sponge, we will sand the panel completely, we will apply a bit of plastic adhesion promoter, and we will spray a little bit of black texture, but very lightly, just to level the colors and ensure that the original texture is not covered. After applying the texture, we also apply the matte varnish, thus protecting the paint and making the panels look like new. And since we are working on the painting, we also take the opportunity to paint these door pieces that have that typical rubber paint that looks bad 2 years after buying the car. You can see with the method of painting with texture and then applying varnish, they look like new and still retain the essence of being plastic. Now that we have all the interior plastics installed, we proceed to apply the silicone-free dashboard polish. We put a small amount on the sponge and apply it to all the plastics in the car. This is how we restore some shine and nourish it, as these plastics have not seen a good product in a long time. Once the polish dries with a dry cloth, we finish spreading the product and remove the excess. Guys, we are at the final stretch of the car. Now comes a pretty serious topic, and that is the seats. The seats are the originals with some kindness covers placed on top, covers from the brand El Primo. The driver's seat had a significant tear, both in the fabric and in the foam, on both the top and bottom parts. The thing is, I had a set of leather seats in the workshop. Aeromagic gave me another set made of leather and Alcantara, but the leather part was quite ugly on all the seats. So I thought of taking the electric front base and transferring the fabric part, repairing the driver's seat, to the electric base. The fabrics were exactly the same shape. Everything was the same. The only thing that changed was the upholstery. So what I had to do was repair the fabric of the driver's seat and use the foam from the new leather seat. The rest of the seats in the Lion were practically new. The only issue was that they were dirty, so all we had to do was scrub them. The first thing we are going to do is clean all the seats. We take them to the washing area and grab the cleaned ones from Mercadona. Just kidding. Don't use those products because they usually contain lye and are meant to remove kitchen grease. Using them in places like the car, the rims and all that will ultimately damage the paint and plastic. So I don't recommend it. It's better to buy a degreaser, even if it's for the kitchen, than to use a cleaner. When the fabrics are dry, we move on to the repair of the seat. Here, basically what we have to do is unpick the piece that we need to change and use it as a pattern to make a new piece. Once we have the new piece cut, we sew it to the rest of the seat pieces, and that's it. That part is repaired. The fabric we used is not exactly the same, but it looks more or less okay and can work for the repair. At least we don't have that tear in the seat anymore. And for the part of the seat that has exactly the same tear, we do the same. We uncover the piece, take out the pattern, and sew the new piece of fabric. Now, we need to mount these fabrics that we have repaired onto the foam of the leather seats. And here I had a surprise because I saw that the driver's seat of one of the leather seats I had heating. So we are going to mount it on this fabric and take the opportunity to make the heating work. As the foam tends to lose density with use and time, to make it less noticeable, we are going to add a small filling of 1 centimeter foam. Well, the fabrics also tend to stretch and can become quite loose, so to correct that a bit, we add this padding. As you can see, the repaired part looks perfect, but the fabric feels a bit loose, and that's because they have lost the original foam padding, making them a little more baggy. And for the seat part, we also use the companion foam. This is in perfect condition with no tears, and since it has built-in heating, it works for us. To activate the heating, since we don't have the installation done in the car, what I'm going to use is a heating button that I bought for the motorcycle but didn't use, and I'm going to put it directly on the seat, because the only seat that has heating is this one, as I don't know why the extra that came with that Toledo was heating only in the driver's seat. And we do the same with the passenger seat. We mount the fabrics on the electric bases. We can install our electric seat in the car. You may wonder, how are these electric seats powered? With the cables used for the RGB lights we installed under the feet. In the rear seats we have the middle seat belt, and we also have it available in blue. So we disassemble the seat, remove the original seat belt, and put on the blue upholstery. Now we have to reupholster the gear shift. If you remember, it was orange. Such bad taste as it looks horrible. Just like we did with the seat, we uncovered it and used one of the pattern pieces to cut the new fabrics. I am going to use black synthetic leather, which matches best, and what we are going to do is add blue stitching. The knob that came with the car was quite damaged, so I bought one from AliExpress. To be honest, I don't know how long the upholstery part will last, but they usually don't last very long. However, it works for my needs. And the frame that holds the aging gear shift, since it was worn out and the paint was quite ugly, we directly painted it black with texture and varnish, and it looks perfect. The next part of the car, and this is definitely the final one, is the tacky steering wheel, as it takes bad taste to put a bright orange steering wheel. I'm not going to get worked up about it here because I could have it upholstered, but what I did was grab a steering wheel from a Leon MK2. This steering wheel is upholstered in leather, and what I like is that it has multifunction capabilities, as I want to make it work with the car's radio later on. The part of the steering wheel's rim has wear on the leather, and this is common as it happens to all VL groups after a short time. To solve this, we are going to take a sanding sponge and sand the entire leather well to remove any imperfections and smooth out the worn areas. We are going to apply an adhesion promoter just like we would if we were painting plastic, and we will also apply plastic texture. Well, those of you who follow me in the videos know that I have done this a ton of times and I always recommend it. This lasts a long time, it's super easy to do, and I can tell you that I've spent up to 2 or 3 years with a car, and it hasn't peeled or had any issues. As you can see, when it dries, the texture of the leather is slightly lost, but the finish it leaves is still quite good. Now, a question that many of you surely have is whether the airbag cables from one model work for another. The answer is no. You need to take the connectors from the airbag and the clash-on from the Leon MK2 and adapt them to the yellow connector of the MK1. It's super simple. Just connecting them allows the airbag to be detected by the car exactly the same way, and when it comes to installing the steering wheel in the car, it screws in exactly like the original. And now, a detail that cannot be missed. The new car mats. You can choose them with red or black stitching. There were no blue ones, so I bought the black ones. What I did was take them, put them in my sewing machine, and sew a blue stitch over the black one to add a detail that matches the rest of the car. Yes, I know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, what can I say? And now, yes, we have the interior 100% finished. And you might be thinking, is the car done? Well, yes, if it weren't so capricious, because we are going to add spacers, wheels, and coilovers to lower it. Here's a quick summary for you. We removed the original wheel, took out the original shock absorber, and well, here before putting in the new shock absorber, we had a broken boot here, which I planned to fix when I did the car's mechanics, but considering that I was going to change the suspension, I didn't do it. We also had a broken joint, I didn't know it was broken, and since I had already changed the boot, I also replaced the joint. The shock absorber, as designed for this car, fits exactly like the original without any modifications, and the wheel bolts on exactly the same as the original in the same place. And for the rear axle, it's the same. We remove the shock absorber and the original spring, install the one from the threaded suspension, bolt on the wheel, lower the car, and it's ready to go. And now we are going to give the exterior of the car a quick clean, so we apply degreaser to the tires to remove the greasy residue they have from when they are new, which looks kind of yellow, and we are going to give the car a quick wash with the CXA1 body shampoo. And to give a more polished finish to the exterior of the car, we apply tire dressing. And folks, I don't know if you're ready, but here comes the before and after of this change we've made to the Leon MK2.
Don't wanna sleep in, cause I got something to prove. I gotta take what I hate and finally make a move. I think of you and all the shit you don't do. Well, I'ma make hella sure that I don't become you. I have no regrets, yeah, I'll tie up my chest. I'll never forget what it's like to be in debt. Been stabbed in the back,